did you recall that at any point before I know you said Granny had fed me from the table, and Granny was a feeder. Did you recall anything that you did personally before any kind of diagnosis or anything like that as far as Molly is concerned?
No.
Okay.
I was busy taking care. We answered that.
Oh, yeah.
I was busy taking care of. You had
The hypospadias
yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
So,
And
how many follow-ups with Dr. Schutte do you remember that I had before he's like, the weight's a problem?
Dr. Schutte did not mention weight to me. He would say, I'm sure, I don't recall, but I'm sure that he would say something like he needs to lose weight
Right,
or
yeah.
something like
He
that.
was really gentle and soft.
He was.
Yeah.
Kind of think about it, he mentioned nutritional counseling from a nutritionist.
Yeah.
And I believe
which is actually pretty good anyway.
Yeah.
Because dietary needs can be different.
Right.
Yeah.
So he wanted that's what now that it just came back to my memory that we did go see a nutritionist and all that, and I think we were getting ready to start all that when we went to the dentist that day.
Right, and that's the I actually put that in that I was going to Dr. Chambers. You recall? I know Dr. Chambers said had a hunch about prader-willi, and that you recall why he said that? I know he said it was because of the teeth deterioration. Was it something that he was studying, or was it something that
what he had noticed? He brought Mom and Dad took you to the doctor that day.
Yeah.
As I recall it like yesterday, because when something happens like that, you just never forget it. And so they had taken him to the doctor because I had to work. I was the dentist. And he walked in. He walked into the waiting room and asked Mom, did she have my pediatrician? He didn't bother to call me. He was
consulting with Dr. Schutte.
He was sort of upset when he thought about it.
Before HIPAA, before you had to sign any papers to release information to another doctor, from one doctor to another, they could immediately confer with another doctor and call them about what they felt was wrong.
Right. So Mom told him it was Harold Schutte.
Yeah.
And he said, well, and Mom said, is there a problem? He said, not an emergency, and I just need to talk to Dr. Schutte. So he didn't call me, he called Dr. Schutte. And told Dr. Schutte that he felt like that he was seeing your weight go up tremendously fast from one visit to another, and then that you had bone deterioration in the front of your mouth where it had been working. And those two symptoms could be a sign of Cushing's disease.
Okay.
So Cushing's disease is not a good thing at all. And so he was very concerned. That's why he went straight to come and call the doctor, because if it were Cushing's disease, it would have been bad, very bad.
Right.
Yeah. So Dr. Schutte turns around and calls me. And evidently he had already called the Developmental Evaluation Center to see if they had any news of what was going on with you or something, if they had anything to say.
Yeah.
And then, because the reason I assumed he did that first before he even called me to talk to me about what they were finding, he knew the doctor was coming there and when she was coming. So he was trying to get, I believe, he knew that what he had to tell me was going to be upsetting, so he was trying to really research it pretty good before he called me and maybe possibly give me an immediate answer, because he knew the type A personality I had, that I was going to go full steam ahead.
Right.
So when he called me, he said, we are, this is what Jared, that there's bone deterioration in his mouth and weight gain. That's a symptom of the disease. He didn't tell me which one. And he said, the doctor from Bone and Gray, there's a great geneticist, and he said, so she will be here in 2 weeks. And she's coming to the Developmental Evaluation Center. And we will have an appointment to take Jared there when she comes in 2 weeks. And we sort of got a little tiff because I said, I don't want to wait 2 weeks. I want an answer. And he said to me, there's no sense in you doing a 3-hour trip. What Jared has, if anything, is not fatal or an emergency. So it's not going to hurt you to wait 2 weeks and let her examine him in Asheville.
Yeah.
Because you may be having to make a trip there anyway. That will save you 1 trip.
Right.
Being reasonable, like sometimes I couldn't be, because I was too close to the situation. So I said, okay. So she came up. I can't remember her name, the geneticist from Wake Forest, and she did all kind of measurements on your head. She looked at your hands, she looked at your feet. They measure different parts of your body. I think she might have taken some blood work, but they really checked you over. And then at the end of the visit, she came to me and she said, I had two thoughts in mind that what might be wrong, but there definitely is something wrong. And she said, it is one of 2 diseases, and we're going to pray that it's prader-willi syndrome. But she said, I believe that either has Cushing's disease or prader-willi syndrome. And so, she, being a woman, she knew that I was in a hurry to get to the bottom of it. So she made me an appointment that was on the end of the week. And on Monday, I had to have you admitted to go to Wake Forest. And on Monday. And you were going to be there, she told me, about 3 days because there was a whole battery of tests they would be running. And so that's what we did to get you diagnosed. One of the things that she told me, and I'll never forget this, they worked on me the entire 3 days, all different kinds of testing where you would have to run and not be still for 30 minutes. Yeah. And then they would lay you down very quickly and take your blood. So there was some different kind of testing of what you wanted to see. And so she discussed it with some of the other doctors, and that was the diagnosis of the prader-willi for the symptoms that you showed and the measurements and everything. So the thing that she said, the thing that she said, I'll never forget, and I remember because you just never forget. Back then, prader-willi syndrome was 20-something years old life expectancy. 21. And so she said to me as I was getting on the elevator, and I think she did it on purpose. She was going to make up her mind, but it was the last thing she was going to say to me was what she said. I was going through the elevator waiting for it, and she came up to me and she said, let me tell you something. You either get this weight off him or he will die. He won't live very long. I'm not saying he's going to die tomorrow, next week, quickly. You don't get this weight off him, he will die eventually. He has to get the weight off. And I think that's why I think she waited till the last minute to say that. She wanted to leave me, which was a very smart thing to do, with that thought that this was, she was trying to say how important this was. Because I'm sure a lot of parents might have heard that and not taken it seriously. Yeah. And thought, well, and then the first time the child, they wouldn't have had the discipline to say to that baby or child, no, you can't eat. That's the hardest part, to turn around and look at a child knowing they're hungry. They really truly are hungry, and know that you cannot feed them. So I discussed that with the doctor one time, and these little tidbits is what helped me be a less worrisome. And I always digested those and never forgot those little tidbits. And one of the tidbits that the doctor gave to me one time was, I said, I just feel so bad because he's hungry, and I know he's hungry, and I can't do anything to stop the hunger. And I just want to give it. He said, there's one thought process in the alone that you should have. No matter how much food you give him, it's not going to help. He's going to be hungry anyway, no matter how much food you give him. So why should you give it to him? It's not even serving a purpose the first time.
Talked about hyperplasia before, as far as being that little noise that you always hear. It really does become that. Although it's all complete head hunger. It really is. I don't think, I mean, you might have some somatic hunger pains from it, but I think 95% of it, at least for me, and again, it affects everyone differently. It's head hunger. It's not that you're physically hungry; it's that you want the food. And you kind of addressed this next question already a little bit. When you said versus Cushing, but when I was diagnosed with prader-willi syndrome, that was more of a relief.
For me,
yes. Yeah, more of a relief than a concern. Which is different now, because when kids are diagnosed with prader-willi syndrome, because it's done so soon after they're born, because all these different factors kind of line up, and then there's blood work, and then they're diagnosed. It was different because we had all these questions, and like you said, Cushing's disease was a far worse diagnosis for me to have, and it was a relief that I had prader-willi at that point. So, I know you had said the geneticist said get the weight off of him. Was there any prescribed diet that I initially had?
They gave, and I think I had already been given the pyramid diet.
Okay.
By the nutritionist. And so that's what they suggested.
Just to continue
a balanced diet, but this was like 900 calories.
Okay.
Instead of adult would be more calories.
Right.
And at that time they were saying that prader-willi children burned
fewer calories.
Burned the calories that they burned 60% less than a human. A regular, than somebody without prader-willi.
Right.
They burned it 60% slower.
Yeah, and that's still the science. The science says that the metabolism is much slower, especially younger in life, because of the hypertonia, and that can follow you for decades. It really can. I think, and we'll talk about this in the next video about how HCG helped me in every way, including metabolism. But so we talked about Mrs. Patterson, the preschool teacher, and what was that first plan with preschool? As far as I know, I remember the Aunt Selma log and the different things that you did for me nutrition-wise. But was there like a protocol about he can only have one snack, or this is the only snack he can have?
Well, I believe I took your lunches to school.
Yeah.
What I tried to do, because it's to me, you always try to keep the child involved in what is going on in his own life and make them a part of it.
Yeah.
And they can understand it better if you make them as much a part of it as you can. And if you remember this, our first thing when we got home was go to grocery.
Yeah.
And I cleared a cabinet out at my mom's. Do you remember that? And I told you that was your special cabinet,
Mhm.
that only you had food in that cabinet because you were very special.
Mhm.
Because it's hard to explain to a 3-year-old, you know,
Yeah.
trying not to make it a negative thing, just this
Yeah.
is the way it is type deal.
Mhm.
And so I read up on all the calorie-free things, and I read up on the type of things that they put on the salad bars at the prader-willi homes, trying to get some food that you could eat more of without calories, like
Mhm.
lettuce, like I think dill pickles used to be a thing that
Mhm.
you could have mostly all you wanted. But what I did was I took you to the grocery store with me, and we would I would stand there and read the labels, and I would explain to you, well, you can have this to eat because it's this, you know, knowing that you weren't comprehending all of it, but that it was part of your life, and I needed to involve you in as much. I mean, even if you say stuff that a child does not understand at that age,
I think
you're
I knew
still
about
making an
calories
impact
very early.
very early.
I knew about calories. So.
Mhm. So I did those kind of things, and also lifestyle had to change.
Yeah.
And your biggest lifestyle change was that you could no longer stay with grandma because, or granny as you call
Yeah.
her, because she could not say no.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing for a parent, and that's why, you know, that was so good that the doctor told me, no matter how much you feed them, it's not going to do any good because he's still going to be hungry. So what have you done in the long run?
Yeah.
So I didn't think that my mother was a very tender-hearted person, and so I didn't think that she could do that.
Yeah.
So the first thing that was done was, I believe it was the next week you were in. I searched for daycare, went and looked at a couple of them, found this wonderful daycare. And the second great thing about the daycare I found, Jared could go swimming. And so that was burning calories. And he even taught himself to swim.
Swimming was really the first thing that I did that could take my mind off of my next meal. It really could. And I don't know why, but it really did. And I loved it. I loved being in the water, and it was therapeutic. And several folks in the community have talked about the difficulties that they've had with PT and getting their um, toddlers and infants orientated and making strides. And I mentioned that aquatherapy is just a great thing. And I think really that did nothing but help me was learning to swimming, and help me lose weight, and really therapeutically probably get over any remnants of hypotonia that I had, especially under the age of 5. I mean, I did have some things, that I occupationally had to grow out of with hypotonia. So again, like Mom said, swimming was a great thing, and like I'm telling you now, that it was one of the things that kind of helped me take my mind off food.
I was thinking maybe you wanted to explain tactile defensiveness to them before you went through with that.
So tactile defensiveness, as Mom explains, and is the hypersensitivity in the skin
And sense of touch.
in the sense of touch. Yeah, it's like it's too stimulating. So, and again, I have this to this day. I have remnants of this tactile defensiveness or skin hypersensitivity, where certain fabrics and certain textures in fabrics, certain seams, um, will bother my skin or bother me. Mentally, it's more for me sometimes. Like the cuff of my shirt being too tight bothers me. Polos with a heavy seamed button collar bother me. Um, pants that cuff too tightly around my legs bother me. Okay. So the hypersensitivity or tactile defensiveness when I was younger was very big because this was before I'll say Old Navy, and everything had nylon in it because nylon was the new fabric. The nylon and plastics, especially in children's clothing, really bothered me. So you like to put me in polos, and I would walk around with a polo I didn't like this the whole time because I didn't want that nylon thread against my skin, or shirts that cut me at the bottom, or my socks up too high. I was always pushing up. The thing at that point was wearing the socks up high because it was kind of like the soccer look that kids had. And I would always want to push my socks down.
Yeah. The doctor explained to me that what it was is when I put a shirt on you or a pair of pants, it had to touch you the same all over.
Right.
And if it didn't touch you the same all over, then that's where the problem was. So I had to find shirts with no collar, but t-shirts basically.
Yeah.
And in the winter that was hard because then I had to go to long sleeve t-shirts. But they couldn't be real heavy or all that.
Yeah.
So you ended up wearing pull-up blue jeans and t-shirts, long or short, depending on the time of year it was. The other thing was if you got a drop of water on that shirt, and if it had an interface right here with a 3-buttoned-up shirt, but you would get water and you would pull the shirt out as you probably don't remember that part, but because you were like still in diapers. You would stand there and scream for me to get that shirt off you and pull it out like this and scream like, get the shirt off. It's an emergency,
Yeah.
And so it created, like on Sunday morning, going to church to try to find you a dressier look than a t-shirt. And thinking that people would think I was a terrible mother, I couldn't even dress you correctly for church, because back in the 70s, people really dressed up for stuff like that.
Yeah, early 80s.
Yeah. And so I would try to trick you into wearing. Sometimes I would say, well, let's pour talcum powder right there, and maybe you can't feel it. No, that didn't work. Well, let's put a tissue. I thought, well, a Kleenex was really soft, but that wasn't the point because no matter what I put there, it's still touching you differently than the rest of the shirt. It's like a collar. You could see it with the collar. The collar doesn't touch you all the way around. You could wear
tags.
Tags. Tags. Get the tags out. I knew it right away when I bought a shirt. I had to tag it.
Yeah.
And you don't leave a string on each end of it because you can feel the strings. It was trying at times with clothes because trying to figure out, it was a dread because is it going to wear this? Is it not going to wear it? I would try to sneak things by you, but it just worked. So that is something that, the thing with prader-willi too is that you're not dealing with one thing. That's what makes prader-willi so difficult. There's so many facets, and which is what syndrome is. It's a collection of things. So you're not dealing with one thing. You're dealing with almost all things. And it's more trying. So I think what it is that there are times that prader-willi parents will get down about things. But that old saying that one day at a time, one problem at a time, is all you can do, and that's how I felt of it with you. I would have a tendency, being a type A personality, to worry a lot about the future. But I learned real quick that, and like, and the Bible even tells us that, not to do that. So that you worry about today, you take care of problems that are there today. And you know, whatever. And a lot of times, like you had, it felt like, and we talked about these two different conditions.
Yeah.
Because you dealt with, and that's what people go through. They deal with kids with prader-willi. They deal with the different conditions,
yeah.
and you have a different doctor.
And so many kids,
place.
yeah, so many kids are have profound issues with scoliosis.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself is its own diagnosis. You know, it's its own set of problems, its own surgeries. You know, my issue was hypospadia. So I think, you know, we're all kind of given different profound things to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But
and it's different too. It's different for each parent. So I don't think there's two prader-willi kids probably exactly alike, just like there's no other two kids exactly like.
Right.
Even though they have that disease in common. How, you know, it's hard enough to find a person with prader-willi here.
Yeah.
And to find one that has even one of the problems that your child has.
Right.
It could be very difficult.
Yeah.
And I think that's difficult for the parents because you would love to find somebody that's exactly, and kids with other problems that may be true, but like Down syndrome, prader-willi syndrome, that most likely it's not going to be the way it goes.
Yeah. You want to take a break then?
I hope I'm not talking too much.
All right. So we talked about the plan for prader-willi in preschool and Miss Patterson, what she did to help. What was the plan for me when I went into kindergarten as far as prader-willi syndrome goes? What was there any? I know my weight was down when I started kindergarten. Was there any dietary plan or anything like that at school, or was it just that we would do most of the stuff at home?
We would do the stuff at home. I believe I packed your lunch. You remember?
I remember eating at the school restaurant.
Yeah, what
you
call the school restaurant.
Yeah.
Because you were excited about that.
Yeah.
And riding the school bus in the school restaurant. So I don't remember a lot of things because by that time, that was 2 years into this. And I don't remember that the teachers addressed learning disabilities and
the dyslexia was the big
dyslexia
diagnosis from that year.
Yeah. And you were well behaved and all that. There was no problems. I started you at 5, I believe. You hadn't turned quite 6 yet because of when your birthday was, and so you were a little young, and with problems that you had, I think that they felt like probably that I should have held you for another year. But they didn't say that much about it. So they didn't mention to me at the beginning of when you started school, and I suppose after you've been there for a while and you were well behaved anyway, that they decided that you'd already started now and they would tackle a problem if there was one later. And you did end up staying in first grade, I believe it was, an extra year. And I think it helped you. But I think you got a little bit, I probably should have held you back because then you had a set of friends in that grade and they moved on without you. And that made me a little sad that was the way it was. But you have to weigh what's good for your child in a situation like that. What's the most important?
Yeah. And I think that you did the right thing. I think that given my age, that was probably the best thing. And just like the reason I told you that we waited until a year for Waylon, it's just that we wanted to her to have the best footboard and be a late starter is better than to be an early starter for a lot of kids. So, did you have any idea up until that point from birth until 5? Did you have ever? And I'm gonna ask. This is going to be a common question in the other videos we do. Did you feel that there was going to be a time that you could see or imagine just from birth until the time that I was 5, when I would lead an independent life, that I would be able to? Did you see that I was going to be somebody that didn't need care all the time and didn't need that I was going to be my own person and be an adult and work and all that?
I did. And one of the reasons was your type of personality that you had even as a young child. Showed me it was little things that you would say that would show me even that this can be a problem, and it did become a problem for you. You were always a dreamer, and you was looking at the future all the time. And I had problems with that because you were always a step ahead. Like if we're doing something, you're always thinking about what we're doing next before we finish what we're actually doing. And you were that way, and you were sitting on the floor, and one day you turned around and you looked at me and you said, "When I retire," and you were about 4 years old at that time, I know what I'm going to do when I retire. Well, how does he know about retiring? You said, "I'm going to be a candy maker because I can make money and make other people happy at the same time." And so, and your imagination, you had such an imagination that it was hard for me to believe that. And it was because of the things that you imagined, it was hard for me to even see you not being just your typical or even above average type person. You know, the fact that we used to laugh about this. You were just barely like 3, 4 years old, and I had a friend, and she liked to go barefooted around the house. She would come to visit, and her bare feet would be, and you were just little, so you would get down there and you liked to play, act. You said, "I'm going to be your doctor, and I'm going to operate on your toe." And you were like 3 years old, and she would just let you sit there and operate on her toe and stuff like that. The other thing that you would do is you were stimulated by a lot of things, and movies being one of them, because my whole family loves TV and loves movies, and I grew up with that, and I think I instilled that in you. But I remember when you were little, you couldn't buy a VCR at first. So you went to the grocery store and you rented a VCR, and then you rented a movie, and you could go home and hook the VCR up, and we watched. I remember that you told me one time years later, you remember the first movie we watched.
Yeah.
And read. So those things seem to really set your imagination off, especially if it was something science fiction or horror. You were allowed to watch about anything you wanted growing up, as long as it didn't have curse words and stuff like that in it. And so you had a real vivid imagination. I always knew when we went to the movies, the minute we got home, what you were going to do. You were going to be gone for a little while in the bedroom or out in the yard, and eventually you had to make a character of yourself for that movie. So the funniest one that I remember was Elephant Man. It was when the Elephant Man came out and it was black and white movie. And you would think about a kid thinking black and white movie, but no, you were very excited about that. And because it was a true story, later in years you told me that was the scariest movie for you because it was based on a true story. But you went outside, I heard the back door open and close, and I heard you the paper shuffling and all that. So that was the start of it. That's when you started learning to recreate stuff. And so here you came and you got a branch out of a tree and took taking the leaves off of it and made you a cane. And you put underwear, a pair of your underwear on your head and fixed it where you could look out the eyeball. And I heard you limping. And I heard this limp because we had a long hallway into the living room and all I could hear was you limping. Well, you had that thing and you were limping like the Elephant Man and came down through there with that on your head. And then the second funniest story was...
I'd say I'm not an animal. I think
I'm
not an animal.
You would say, I'm not an animal. So, you would crack me up, be very entertaining. And so the other thing is when we went to, I had gone to the beach, and I always brought you a little goodie when I went to the beach for a week with the girls. And I had brought you a Mr. T kit.
You told me this story.
Where you could make the beard, and it had the real long gold necklace and a big gold ring. And you'd made your beard, and it even had a mohawk strip in there that you could put on your head. And you wanted to wear that to the grocery store. So you went to the grocery store, we were walking down the aisle, and this old man came up through there, and he was grinning at you. He thought you looked so cute, but he could tell what you were made up like. And he was grinning at you and looking at you, and you looked at him and you said, I thought I was so embarrassed. He was staring at you and you said, what you looking at, fool? Which is what Mr. T said all the time. I was so embarrassed. But
so
there were those things.
My imagination made you think that I was too creative to live independent, to live not independently,
Right. No,
that I would escape.
No, it was that you had a thought process that you would have the drive to be everything that you could be, that you wanted things, you were interested in things, and just your whole demeanor at a very early age, you didn't, because I tried, and I think parents do this on the most part, when you have child's problems, you try to make it seem, but especially if they're born that way, you try to make this as normal as you can. So you don't create, you try to create independent situations for that child, to prove, to give them that drive, to make them interested in the world around them and all that. And so I think that you were so interested in everything. You could draw at an early age. You could make anything out of a paper bag, and that you wanted to create is what you wanted to do when you were little.
What would be, now thinking about this period from birth to 5, what is the greatest piece of advice that you think you could give to a parent that's got a child that's in this age from birth to 5?
I think that it's sort of hard to, it's like never give up hope for that child. Until they reach a certain age, you are their hope. And so you never, always push your child. Not in a bad way. You place before them opportunities and you push them for normalcy, because it would be very easy with all the things they're facing for that life not to be so normal. So you always try to keep it, and there again, the terms normal can be different for different people, but you always expect. You get out of children what you expect from children.
And
so you put don't lower your expectations for that child.
And that comes back to a conversation I talked about before on the channel about a father that came to me. And he said, "You grew up with prader-willi, and I've got a daughter with prader-willi. How do I approach the prader-willi over versus how I treated my other kids?" And I told him, I said, "You treat this daughter just like you would that daughter,
Right.
because you don't owe you owe her just as much as you gave to the other child. You know, she deserves everything that you give.
And
Don't make any, maybe be understanding, but don't give any less. Don't do the same approach.
See, the parents do think about that kind of thing in relation to that child. Yeah. The other thing is that, and you'll do this without realizing it, and it's good for parents to check themselves sometimes. And what would happen with me is you would check me as the child, so that you don't fall into, because you run the gambit between wanting to protect your child from failure or from hurt or pain mentally, but you can't be so protective that you're guarding them from things that they need to experience or not expecting out of that child, because children can live so much farther than our own expectations of them if we give them that room. And just because they have prader-willi, we try to protect them more. And sometimes that protection can get in the way of expectation. Mm-hmm. So you have to weigh those two things. You don't, as my parents always had all these sayings that were wise sayings, like, well, you get what you expect out of life. You've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that that's true with your children a lot of times. If you don't expect anything out of them, no matter what their problems are. And the other thing to help me is, it can be easy to spoil a child with problems. And what I mean by spoil, I don't mean by giving them too much. I mean by not making them, correcting them when they're wrong, by blaming what you think they can't do. You blame it on the deceased. Don't fall into that, because you're not just raising a child with prader-willi. You're raising that individual who has his own thoughts and his own dreams. And so what you have to be careful not to overprotect. And part of being a parent is correcting a child and training a child. And talking to a child, explaining to a child. Sometimes you might think that you shouldn't explain something if they won't get it. Well, they'll surprise you. That's the thing. Prader-willi kids, you surprise me a lot. And let's face it, it's up to them. A little part of that is up to that child. You can't be totally responsible for every breath they take. So if you allow them to breathe, grow, make mistakes, and be as normal as, just like you told him to treat him like you did his other children, that's allowing them room to grow when you do that. So, but it's easy. And like, when I remarried, when we were 11, I thought that your stepfather was too rough on you, that stuff, and my first inclination was just to almost protect you from him. But then later in life, we see that dads are usually harder on the kids in a lot of ways than moms are, because her job is to protect you and his job is to make you a man. or, you know,
Yeah.
especially as a boy. So there was things that it was hard for me to let Ronnie have his way on, your stepdad, but in the long run, it was the best thing for you, but it was hard for me to watch sometimes. So I think that, and to be, you know, when there's two parents there, I was saying I didn't have that luxury most of the time because you and I lived by ourselves for quite a few years. Is that you're not always going to maybe agree as a couple on that, and the best thing to do is to each give a little bit, so that makes that child more well-rounded.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, that was ages birth through 5. This conversation here with my mom about growing up with Prader-Willi syndrome, and thank you for watching Chronically PWS.